Hey everyone, Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's Monday. I've got Mike DeFabo on, and we're going to talk about the Steelers' offensive line. What's the biggest challenge facing this group? Is it Broderick Jones? Is it the group as a whole? Is it just finding the coalescence of a young group moving forward? All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this, if you enjoy it, subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $150 in bonus bets. Download the app today or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Like I said, we're going to talk about the offensive line with Mike DeFabo from the Athletic Steelers Reporter. Here's my conversation with him on today's episode. As we said, we have Mike DeFabo from The Athletic. He's here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. A reminder, this show is being recorded on Wednesday evening of February 5th. So because I'm on vacation. So if there's certain parts of the things that we don't discuss that have happened, please excuse us as we are recording this so I can have a little bit of free time this weekend. But Mike, we're having you on the show today. I want to talk about the Steelers offensive line. This was supposed to be the group that took the biggest step forward this past year. Broderick Jones was supposed to be better. Zach Frazier was supposed to be an upgrade. And we're going to get to their grades in the next segment. And I will say Zach Frazier definitely was an upgrade. But, you know, you had several things that kind of took things off the rails a little bit. James Daniels was one of the best, was the best offensive lineman early in the season. He gets hurt. He's out for the year. Isaac Seumalo, before the season gets started, he gets injured. He misses the early part, never really plays at the level that he did last year. And then Dan Moore has to start at left tackle because Troy Fautanu got hurt. And then Broderick Jones stayed at right tackle. Out of all those things, it's understandable to see that there's a lack of production. But what is the biggest thing that has to happen in your mind next year if this offensive line is going to take that next step forward?
Well, Broderick Jones has to play like a first-round pick. I mean, so
Agreed.
much of the Steelers' plan was predicated upon not only Broderick Jones being really super solid at right tackle, but at some undetermined time that even the Steelers wouldn't be able to tell you when it was going to be, he was supposed to be able to switch to left tackle on the fly and perform like a first-round pick there. Now, ultimately, the injury to Troy Fautanu disrupted that, but I mean, Broderick had serious questions, and concerns, even when he was in right tackle, just playing one position. And I felt like he went through a little bit of a sophomore slump almost, especially early on in the season. And so, really the key for their offensive line is Broderick has to play like a first-round pick. I think that's the biggest thing is you spent years investing in the offensive line. These were not flashy or sexy picks, but the hope was it was going to pay off for you down the line. The only way it does is if Broderick turns into a stud.
And I'm right with you there. I think that Broderick Jones has to step up. And I think the thing is that Broderick Jones, he has had, there's some games that I've seen where I'm like, hey, if they can get that Broderick Jones, that's what you've been waiting for. But then he'll follow it up with another game where it's like, well, wait a second. Where was what we saw in the last game? And I think it's that consistency that you need from him. Now, as Mike Tomlin's pointed out to us, he is young. He's younger than both Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier, and that's part of the learning curve. And you want him, and he was very raw coming out of college. He didn't start a whole bunch of games like Mason McCormick did and like Zach Frazier did in their career. So he still had some adjustments he had here. But to your point, when the Steelers drafted their last great offensive line for the 2010s, Marquise Pouncey first round, David DeCastro first round, Marcus Gilbert second round. Those were the guys that were the anchors of that offensive line. They were the game changers. Pouncey did it right away. It took David DeCastro a little bit longer, I think, to get things going. But once they both did, they were a wrecking crew, and that was what made it. And, Troy Fautanu is a factor in this too. You need him healthy, and you need him to kind of hit the ground running. But you need those guys, to be that. And I think it's different because the Steelers, in their history, I've talked about this for years, but in their history of the Steelers and their team building and their greatest players, the one position that I struggle to ever find like legendary players is offensive tackle. You could think about, Mike Webster, Dawson, Pouncey. They got centers all over the place. Alan Faneca, David Cat. They got guards, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, fullbacks, corners, safeties, linebackers, D-line. They got everywhere. Tackle is the one position where they've had some good players, but they've never had that. They are in the best of the NFL type of conversation. And I think that's something that they need one or probably both of these guys to get in the conversation with in the next, I'd say, 3 to 4 years. And Broderick Jones particularly has to start making that step this upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think that Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, is going to find himself under the microscope this season yet again, because when the Steelers put such a big emphasis on the offensive line, they turned Pat Meyer into one of their most important coaches.
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to develop these guys. And look, like, there have been other offensive line coaches who have done much more with much less. Let's look at like Mike Munchak. He took Alejandro Villanueva, a guy who was a tight end at college, went and served his country, came back, was a practice squad guy that they converted and turned into a really reliable tackle who, I think he earned the Pro Bowl nod partially because people had respect for his military service, but he still was a very solid, legitimate starting caliber offensive tackle. And then like look at the Super Bowl, right? Philadelphia Eagles. Their offensive line coach is probably the best in the entire league, Jeff Stoutland, and he took Jordan Mailata, who was a rugby player, who had never even played the game of football in his life, and now he should be a Pro Bowler. I think he led, in Pro Football Focus's metrics, a grading. I think he was the top-rated offensive tackle this year, and some people considered him a snub. So, I agree that, like, Broderick Jones is going to take time, and he wasn't going to be the finished product, and he only had 22 college starts at Georgia, but again, they drafted him because they said, you have the frame, we like your athleticism, we see the potential, and we see you being a first-round caliber type of offensive tackle. To me, it's up to the coaching staff to make that happen.
I agree. And so I ask you, you say Pat Meyer is going to be under a microscope this upcoming season. Do you feel like he wasn't under a microscope this season? Do you feel like there was a No,
I think he was. And I think right now there's a lot of people probably scrolling down to your comment section, Chris, saying they should have fired him, and
I thought he was going to get fired.
I wrote about it. I mean, I don't like talking about other people's jobs. I wouldn't like there's probably people in the comments saying that I'm doing lousy at my job and I should be fired from the Athletic. And maybe they're right. But at the same time, like, this is a performance-based business. And if you're going to try to win by running the football and by investing so much in the offensive line, and it's not happening, who does that fall back on? And to me, the first person would be the offensive line coach.
Yeah, I think you look at that
and
as well.
And again, like Chris, like we're saying, he was under the microscope now. And like next year, assuming there's no change that's made, really, people are going to be like, this offensive line has to take a huge step forward.
Yeah, it does. And I think that there was a point where at the end of the 2023 season, right, there was a sense that maybe they were figuring things out because they were running the ball at the end of the season. They were blocking. There was some oomph in the offensive line, but. And again, as we'll get into the grades, I think there were good things shown throughout this season by different guys. But the problem was this was not supposed to be an average to slightly below average offensive line. This was supposed to be a good offensive line this year. And again, maybe James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo's injuries play a big factor, as well as Troy Fautanu's 3 players that you were expecting to be starters this season. That's certainly a factor, and you shouldn't discount that. But you wanted to see more development out of guys. I will say certain guys maybe overperformed, and we're going to get into that in the next segment. I'm right with you. The test is going to have to be, can this offensive line, you don't need guys running into each other in playoff games. You don't need guys not knowing how to use their hands to engage with guys to keep them from getting inside their frames or committing bad penalties. You need this group to be clean next year. They don't have to be the most dominant. They don't have to turn into the Eagles overnight, but they got to be a clean unit that doesn't cost the team and is more above average than they are closer to being an actual average team.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like where they go from here, they've already made the investment at the tackles. They do have their center of the future in Zach Frazier.
Yes.
So I'm curious what happens from here with the guard position, because, I like some of what we saw from Mason McCormick, especially early. And I think that he has the right temperament in the run game He was a little inconsistent. I think maybe hit a little bit of a rookie wall. But, he was only, what, a fourth-round draft pick? Like, will they want something better than that if their whole goal is to win on offensive line? And then when it comes to Isaac Seumalo, I actually think he's been a bit underwhelming for what I expected out of him.
I agree.
Like when you said Andy Weidl came from Philadelphia, he's bringing an offensive lineman with him. I thought that this guy was going to be the stud, and you were going to be like, he's clearly the best offensive lineman in every game, and everybody else is trying to rise to that level, and he's kind of setting the tone and leading the group. I don't know that happened really, Chris. I don't know about your assessment of things. And next year, I believe, is the last year of his contract. So, I almost do wonder if maybe the Steelers start thinking about, filling his position and maybe another guard, and maybe trying to turn guard into another one of their strengths in another position that they invest in. But maybe that waits till next year. But I think that's my next question, is kind of like, where do they go from here at guard? Because you've already addressed the tackles, and you got your center.
We'll discuss that next in the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got my grades coming up on the season, stars and skulls. We tabulated all of them. That comes up next here. Stick with us in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo. We'll be right back. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn Job clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy for you to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. If you add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, it doubles your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, let's get into some stars and skulls grades on the offensive line. As always, throughout the season, we had our rubric where if you had a positive or negative impact, you can get grades from anywhere from 1 stars to 3 stars for good to elite play, 1 skulls to 3 skulls for bad to terrible play. You can also get neutral grades if you just were kind of middle of the road or you balanced yourself out throughout the game.
So my question for you, Chris, before you keep going, how many stars do you need to get a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut?
You're terrible. 50. No one's ever gotten it. I think the most was like
the old bucket. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Bucket. I remember because I got several of those personal pan pizzas in my day. I would get them books stacked up. But in all seriousness, now I think the most we've ever gotten though was like I think TJ Watt in that year that he had, like he tied the sack record. I think he got like 40 something. It was ridiculous.
Well, what do they get? It should either be like a personal pan pizza, or it should be like when you go to Dave and Buster's and at the end, you've got your options: the sticky hand, or like,
you know what? I'll come up with some
animal.
You know what? If they do enough, they'll get to have this Marvel versus Capcom game that's been sitting on my desk for over here collecting dust. That's where you go. If someone ever gets 50 stars, I promise to give them this Marvel versus Capcom game. That's what you.
There we go.
Anyway. Let's get into this now. I do want to address something from one of our previous grading shows. When I did the cornerbacks with Alan Saunders last week, I forgot to include this slide. Corey Trice, I know some people caught it, but Corey Trice on the year, just a C grade, didn't play a whole lot, had 2 stars, had 2 skulls. Wasn't going to bang him too much for things down the stretch of the season, but he has some flashes, but still a young, still unproven cornerback, and why I think they're going to invest in cornerback this offseason, be it either in the trade or the draft or the free agency or the draft or all 3.
I agree with you, Chris.
Yeah. So let's move into it. We're going to work our way quickly through some of the offensive linemen that didn't play a whole lot. Ryan McCollum, I actually gave him 3 stars when he actually was filling in on the offensive line this year. He had some really good showings. Good enough for a C+ because he had no skulls. Good sign on him. Also, and then we go through the other guys. Troy Fautanu appeared in one game, had a good moment, 1 star. Can't really do much there. That's just the C because he had no skulls. Can't really hold that against him. James Daniels actually had 5 stars in the 3 games that he played with no skulls. I mean, that was a very good rate. I'm telling you, like, if he was healthy throughout the whole season, he might have been a difference maker for the Steelers. I know Mason McCormick was a really good addition. We'll talk about him in a bit, but I thought he was solid. And then the last of the guys who didn't play a whole lot, Spencer Anderson. There's actually one more too. But Spencer Anderson, 2 stars, 3 skulls. Not a whole lot there. Solid for a backup offensive lineman. I think that's another thing is that the backup offensive linemen actually kind of weren't the pit of the problems. They actually kind of held it down when they were there, as did Calvin Anderson, 1 star, no skulls. All these guys, C's, and I think that's a good sign that they were at least able to do that. The guys who didn't play a whole lot, Mike, they at least showed, they showed that they could hold down their jobs temporarily so that starters could come back. I think the biggest problem is that the starters that this team's been investing into keeping weren't the answers that they hoped they'd be this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the guy that stuck out to me of that group you just went through was Ryan McCollum, because if Nate Herbig had not torn his rotator cuff in training camp, McCollum would not have made this football team. Right. And when Frazier was injured and they had to start him, I thought that was going to be a huge problem. I thought I thought he was going to be an absolute liability. I thought he was going to, that they were going to be eating his lunch all day. But I thought he played pretty solid in that game. And Mike Tomlin had like really complimentary things to say about him afterwards. So I do give him some credit. The other guy that I'll touch on here of that like replacement group was Spencer Anderson. And I think a lot of people, they looked at him and they said he could play all 5 positions. And so because of that, people thought he could just step in anywhere. But I thought it was interesting how quickly the Steelers pivoted from him and moved on to their future in Mason McCormick. And I think that was the right move by the team, is they had to realize, Spencer Anderson is a fine, last guy on your bench, can play any position in a pinch, but your future was McCormick. And so I think that they were wise to move on quickly and get him into some action.
No, I'm right there. And let's start with Mason McCormick. On the season, I gave him a total of 16 stars, only 6 skulls. And that's good enough for a B. And I think that's the good thing about Mason McCormick, is that when you look over his season, he was often more a positive contributor than he was a negative one. He had some really bad shows, like the second Ravens game, he was pretty rough. Yep. His first go when he came into with the team with the Colts, that was pretty rough. But on the whole, he had a lot of 1-star games this season where it was just he was growing those really quickly. And I thought that was a good sign for him. As far as a 4th-round rookie pick, I thought he delivered more than what you normally expect.
No, I agree with you, Chris, because when the Steelers drafted him, immediately after, we kind of were asking Omar Khan about it, and he was like, well, we have some – basically he said, to paraphrase him, we have some guards who their contracts are going to be expiring within the next year or 2. And what he was talking about was James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo. So this draft pick, when the Steelers made it, they thought this was going to be a guy that developed all season, practiced, and by next year, then maybe then when James Daniels leaves in free agency, maybe then we'll be ready for Mason McCormick. So this guy was really given where he was drafted, he was thrust into action much more quickly than the Steelers anticipated. And for that reason, I think you do kind of have to grade him on a curve. And I think he showed some promise. And you're not going to have an offensive line full of 1st-round draft picks. Right. So you're going to need a guy like Mason McCormick to develop into not a Pro Bowl or anything like that, but just that dependable guy that the Steelers fans know him and appreciate him. He really is kind of the type of guy that needs to continue to develop and continue on the same trajectory if the Steelers are going to have the offensive line that they want to.
Absolutely. I think that he's one of those young guys that should saying, hey, okay, Pat Meyer, good job with him. But one guy that I think that maybe it's just he's hit his ceiling and he kind of turned in the wrong direction this season was Dan Moore. On the season, he racked up some stars early, but he ended up in the negatives, 13 stars, but 15 skulls. He also got the dreaded bus ticket grade where you're that bad that you deserve a bus ticket out of town on the season. That's bad enough for a D grade, not an F grade. He was an F last year. Like there were just so many bad games that he stacked last year that he achieved a rare failing grade here. But I give Dan Moore credit for early in the season. He had several positive games. He was really good against the Falcons in the opener. He was really good against the Giants. I thought he was very good in some of their bigger, wins in the middle of the season against the Commanders, against the Bengals in the first matchup, the Browns in the second matchup. But he also had some complete clunkers. That first Browns game, he was pretty bad. Both the Ravens games and the regular seasons game, he was really bad. He was extremely bad against the Chiefs. He was just getting beat left and right. And then against the Bengals, it was also pretty rough for him there. So I looked at that and I was like, man, this is just, if really the bottom came out on Dan Moore, and if he had just played average down the stretch, I think he would have finished with a much better grade. But I think ultimately, again, he's another 4th round pick. It just didn't work out for him in the long run.
Yeah, he and Broderick kind of had opposite seasons where Broderick was really rough to start, kind of stabilized at the end. Dan Moore was the opposite, where he was, pretty consistent at the start of the year, and then the wheels started to fall off at the end.
Yeah.
And I believe he led the league in sacks allowed and may have given up the most pressures according to Pro Football Focus. So that's not what you're looking for. And I think that tells you right there why the Steelers just spent back-to-back first-round picks on tackle. I mean, truth be told, they've basically been trying to replace this guy for 2 years. And so, I mean, I give Dan Moore a little bit of credit in the sense that, like, he's going to become a wealthy man this offseason. As much as he's been the player that fans have rightfully so looked at and said this is one of the weak links to the offensive line, he also started at the most difficult position for 4 years.
Yeah.
And so there is going to be a team that looks at him and says, you can come here and we'll give you a pretty big payday, and you're going to be our starting left tackle. But it's not going to be with Pittsburgh. They've planned to move on from him, and the time has come to see that to its conclusion.
Agree there entirely. Let's go to the guy that lined up next to him for most of the season. That was Isaac Seumalo. On the whole, I did give Isaac Seumalo more stars than the Skulls. 16 stars and 10 Skulls. Good enough for a C+ grade. But Mike, to the point that we were making earlier, C+ is not what you want out of Isaac Seumalo. You wanted him to be that B+ type of guy, that guy that could be more of a mauler, more consistently be the stud of the unit and kind of set the tone. And he wasn't that this year. I think there were times last year where you could say he was working his way there. And that to me does leave a big question with how do you want to handle the guard position this offseason?
Yeah. I think you probably run it back with the same guys, but can you afford to use a draft pick on another guard this year?
Right.
I think that's the question. Or is there a free agent guard that might make sense? I wonder if what they'll do is bring back Nate Herbig, who has some experience. He could play guard, he could play center, so then he's kind of like your backup in both positions. Get by this season that way, and then next year, once you've addressed some of these other positions, then finally go back. But I wouldn't count anything out. I know that there's a couple offensive linemen that the Steelers really like in this year's draft, and if the right one falls in their lap, they might decide, look, this guy's just too good to pass up.
No, I think that's part of what they could be looking at here, but I agree with you. They've invested a lot in the offensive line in draft capital.
Yeah, like at some point you've got to start being like, defensive line might be the focus this year. Wide receiver, they're going to have to find a running back.
Yeah.
You got to get a corner, whether that's one way, So, maybe if we're talking about like day 3, you take another chance on an offensive guard. I could see that, but I don't imagine this is going to be a position that they pump a lot of resources in this draft.
Agreed. Now let's go to the 1 first-round pick who was playing throughout the season. That was Broderick Jones. On the whole, he did have 13 stars. He had 15 Skulls, so he's more of a negative. I gave him a C- because he was close to that. And honestly, he would have been a straight C if he didn't have that playoff game where he was like running into Dan Moore in the playoffs. And for me, I think that he was on the year, he was very up and down. I think that's the hope that you're the Steelers is that you're hoping that the ups can become more consistent, because when he was there, for example, his highest grades, he never got a 3-star grade on the show, but we gave him several 2-star grades, whether it was the game against the Chargers. I thought he looked pretty strong. The game against the Commanders, back-to-back weeks against at the Bengals, and then at home against the Browns. That was around the time when I was like, okay, he's had like 3 2-star performances in 5 games. maybe he's figuring it out. But then he followed that up with, not a great game, but not a good game against the Eagles. Looked pretty rough against at the Ravens. And then finished it up pretty badly against the Ravens at the end of the season. I think the biggest thing for Broderick Jones is he needs the positive moments when he gets his hands on guys and controls them and uses his size. He needs those moments to come a lot more consistency if he wants to be that first round pick you were talking about in the first segment.
Yeah, I think it's the consistency because you can grab a handful of plays and be like, look, he's mauling this dude or whatever it might be. But that'll happen right before a mental lapse. He also had, to me, just like the pre-snap penalties, there were way too many of those with him as well. And the other thing that stands out when I think about Broderick is, his first year, his rookie year, it seemed like they were really trying to tap into his mobility, whether that be pin and pull type of schematics or whether that's getting him out into space on screens or things of that nature. And it seemed like there was a lot less of that with Arthur Smith. And I wonder if maybe they need to get back to some of that and maybe try to highlight his mobility and his athleticism, because that's really his calling card. Like when he was drafted, he ran the fastest 40 of any offensive lineman in his draft class. The Steelers loved, they talked about like his sweet feet from playing basketball and stuff like that. Those are the things you have to play to this guy's strengths, and you have to. They're only strengths if you make them strengths by deploying him in a certain way. And I feel like they could do more of that next year.
I feel you there. Let's go to the guy that graded the highest of all the offensive linemen. You're probably been waiting for him. It's Zach Frazier. And Mike, I gave this guy an A on the season. He had 22 stars, only 2 skulls. When that's sort of like my barometer. When you are like 20 stars over your skulls, that's where I put you in that A range. He was extremely consistent. And I think that's the good thing for Zach Frazier. Like he had against the Falcons, the Commanders, and the first game against the Bengals, and the game against the Raiders. Those were all 3-star performances. And there were only 2 games where I think that he was more negative than he was positive. He was a solid play. He was a very good player for the Steelers in this year. And if this is the floor for Zach Frazier, I would not want to be a defensive tackle in the AFC North having to face him 2 times a year, because I think he can grow a lot more too with the Steelers.
Yeah, and I mean, I wonder how quickly he would have earned the starting role if Nate Herbig had been healthy. And I think that was maybe a blessing in disguise for the Steelers, because Zach Frazier did bring a tremendous amount of college experience. I think he was ready physically. I mean, the dude is a beast. And then, mentally, he has the right makeup. He's a really smart guy. There's all these stories about like he got like 2 or 3 Bs his entire academic career, and that was when he was in the engineering school at WVU. So I think that he's only going to continue to grow and blossom. And really, one of the biggest things he needs to work on is just the consistency with the snaps. That exchange with Justin Fields continue to be a problem much longer than it should have been. And so that's one key thing that he has to clean up going into next year. But other than that, I don't think that there's a lot. I think it's just about taking that second lap around the track, kind of building upon the foundation that you already have. And I think he's on his way to being what the Steelers thought he would be when they drafted him, which is the anchor of the offensive line for about a decade or more.
If he can be that, that's one major piece they need. They still need Broderick Jones. They need Troy Fautanu. But if they can be the anchors, the same way that Pouncey, DeCastro, and Gilbert were for the last group, if these 3 can be the anchors from the outside and one guy on the inside, that could be the key to this group becoming an elite unit in the next 3 or 4 years. I don't think that next year they're going to be in that conversation, but they have the space next year, I think, to put them in hey, this group is improving. They're becoming a really good unit. They could set themselves up for 2026 that they could be one of the best offensive lines in football.
Yeah, and that's what the Steelers really are hoping and counting on. And I think it makes sense what they've done. Like, when they came in, it wasn't just, hey, we want to be the Philadelphia Eagles. It was also, this is a really bad offensive line. And Kevin Colbert, one of his last drafts, drafted Najee thinking our running game has to improve. And that obviously didn't work. And I think that the current regime realizes if we're going to run the ball effectively, it's not about drafting a running back. It's about the guys up front that are paving the way. and those guys have to get a whole lot better. So, that it's a fascinating position because it's not flashy to talk about the offensive line,
Right.
but given the path that the Steelers have chosen, this is such an integral position group that's going to need to be successful next year for them to, as a collective, achieve what they want to.
Absolutely. Mike, thank you for joining us here. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to fast forward in time to past the Super Bowl because we were recording this well before the Super Bowl, but you're going to see my reaction to that there. Mike, thanks for joining us. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me on social media at Mike DeFabo, and of course, read all of my stuff in The Athletic.
He's Mike DeFabo. Thanks, Mike, for joining us. Stick with us. We got more to discuss here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you missed the first few minutes of the game or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. FanDuel customers can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older and present in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, and 18 and up and present DC. First online real money wager, $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Hey everyone, Chris Carter here from the Locked On Steelers podcast. As I said, I would give you a segment on the Super Bowl while I'm on vacation. The other segments were previously recorded. Here's me reacting after the Eagles stomp the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22 in astounding fashion. Gotta say, I'm surprised, but I feel a little excited about it because it's nice to see someone else win for a bit and to stop the Eagles from the Chiefs from entering the 70 Steelers territory of winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. But to me, story of this game is that the mantra defense wins championships is still very much alive. Yes, offenses are very important in today's NFL and they win a lot of games, but defenses can get you through that. And we now just saw maybe the greatest quarterback next to Tom Brady in the history of the NFL get completely dismantled by this Eagles defense. And it further tells me, and should tell you, that the Steelers' plan should be to continue to build towards what they were trying to get to and being like the Eagles, which is why they got Andy Weidl to work with Omar Khan, why they've been trying to rebuild in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, and why I'm telling y'all defensive trenches are going to be a big priority in the coming months, especially in the NFL draft. A little bit of free agency too, but especially in the NFL draft. You saw how the Eagles got after it. I believe the Chiefs were 3 of 11 on third downs in this game. Mahomes sacked 6 times through 2 interceptions, one of which was a pick 6. And another of them caused directly by the pressure. But he never got his feet set. He never looked comfortable. And that's the form of defense the Steelers eventually want to get to, is dominating the line of scrimmage. And another sense of that Eagles' dominance on defense was the defensive front. They didn't even blitz in this game. That's the crazy part about this. The Eagles were able to say, hey, front 4, go get them all game long, and they collapse the pocket, stuff the run. The Chiefs didn't even run for 50 yards. They have a good offensive line. Didn't even look like it. Creed Humphrey tossed around the whole Chiefs offensive line. They were just dominated in this game. And to me, it furthers the message that the Steelers need to keep building towards being that team. They don't have the superstar quarterback. Most likely aren't going to get one very soon. They're not going to draft one this year. The plan should be to get a mobile quarterback, someone who can add with their legs, throw with their arm, manage an offense well, not lose you the game while you're still building on defense and trying to build up the trenches on offense. And you still need to develop that offensive line. But again, it just looks more and more like, well, I've been saying, Justin Fields seems to be the idea. I think he's the best fit. He knows your system already. He's been in your building. He's been building relationships. You saw him have some success on your team. He's young. He's got a good arm. He's got good size. He's got good wheels. He wasn't hurt last year. A lot of things add up to going and getting that guy. And no, he doesn't have to be the franchise quarterback that tosses for. Again, look at Jalen Hurts' numbers in this game. And Jalen Hurts deserves a ton of credit. Made some great throws, awesome reads. But he didn't have to carry the Eagles. He was able to make some smart throws, make some plays, and the defense backed him up. That's the style of football the Steelers want to play. And I think more and more teams are starting to adopt that. If you don't have a Mahomes, a Burrow, a Jackson, an Allen, you're not going to be able to compete the way that those teams compete. So to counter that, you need to build the trenches on both sides of the ball. You need to win in the run game. You need to protect your quarterback, make him comfortable, and you need to get after the opposing quarterback. That's why I'm still saying the Steelers. We're not doing a mock draft Monday just yet. That'll start next week. But that's why I've been saying the Steelers. It would behoove them to be able to go out and get a guy that's going to add to the middle of that defensive line, be the 1-2 punch with Keanu Benton for the future, and line up with Cam Hayward and Benton in the immediate next 2 years, and say, hey, you're getting back to dominating that side of the ball, the trenches. You're not going to get bulldozed like you did against the Ravens in those last 2 games when you played them at the end of the season. That's, again, just where I think it is. Also, at cornerback, look at what the Eagles are able to do. The reason they're only sending 4-2 is because they can trust their cornerbacks to go just do what they need to do. Slade, Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, fantastic game. Not just the pick 6, but the breakup he had on 4th down. He never looked out of position. He was so ready to do so many different things, and that's what I've been saying. I really think, I know a lot of people want wide receiver. A lot of people want to get, a fancy running back early. I think you can get that in the middle round. I still think you need to get a wide receiver. I'm not saying you don't, but priority for this team, in my opinion, D-line, corner. Those 2 positions are priorities right now so that you can get back to playing dominant defense. The defense for the Steelers was good this year. I'd even say very good at times. But you saw late in the year when teams were able to run the ball on them, it took away from their identity. It took away from their strength. It took away from the pace of ball that they wanted to play. And when they couldn't run the ball, it took away from their offensive side of pace that they wanted to play. The best version of the Steelers this year was when they ran the ball and they played aggressive defense. It helped them beat the Ravens. It helped them beat the Commanders. It helped them get to the 10-3 spot that they were. Now, granted, they fell off down the stretch, but what happened down the stretch? We talked about it. The run game disappeared. Play action pass disappeared. The defense stopped stuffing the run. In fact, I think the last time they stuffed the run was against the Eagles because Saquon Barkley didn't go off in that game. It was Jalen Hurts that hurt him in that game. So I look at this as an opportunity for the Steelers to look and say, hey, we haven't made all the right decisions. We haven't been making the right calls, but that is the idea. That's where you want to go. Whether it's with Mike Tomlin, whether it's with whoever you want to coach, that's the way that Omar Khan needs to keep building the roster over the next coming years. And I think that's what the Steelers have to be looking at right now. And the Eagles, they deserve a ton of credit. Nick Sirianni kept that team afloat even when they cut both of their coordinators last year, and they made aggressive moves to reload. But again, I'm not even sure how much the coordinator changes were the biggest difference. They got those trenches up. Jalen Carter, those guys up front, they're getting after it every single play. Josh Sweat just breathing down Mahomes' neck. They were the difference makers against the Commanders. They made it not matter what Jalen Daniels had to say because you know why? They were able to run the ball all game. I really think that is the ticket for the Steelers if they're going to be moving forward and they want to become one of the better teams in the NFL again. They're a solid team. They're a playoff team. They've made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years. But if they want to get over that hump, they've got to be dominant in the trenches. And that's why I think, again, what the Eagles game is telling you in the Super Bowl this year,
That's where the Steelers have to invest. That's where they have to continue to develop. That's where they have to see progress this year. That's got to be a top priority for Mike Tomlin and how he sets up this team. One of the biggest failures of the year, in my opinion, not necessarily what happened at quarterback, not necessarily other things. I think one of the biggest things that the offensive line didn't show a step forward. This year, there has to be growth. Whether it's Pat Meyer, whatever it is, they need to be able to show that, hey, there's the future of this group being a dominant unit again. The defensive line, they need to reinvest into it. I think Larry Ogunjobi is not a guy that you want around for the money that he's being paid right now. You need to get a younger guy in the middle there. Again, I really like Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I think he's a really good fit. And then when you're building, you can also get a young corner to pair with Joey Porter Jr. And you can even look for a slot corner because, again, I think I forget who made this online after the Super Bowl, but they said slot corners are very much in. Look at what Cooper DeJean has did for the Eagles in this game. It's fine if they get a slot corner and then they sign an outside corner for the long term. That's fine by me, but the Steelers need guys who can run, cover, play physical, play fast, play aggressive, and play their style of ball. The Steelers use man coverage the 10th amount most in the NFL this past season, but they didn't have the guys who can stick and run with them late in the season, and that cost them when they tried to play that style of ball against the better teams in the NFL. If they want to get there in the next 2-3 years, they got to build towards that. That means invest in D-line, invest in corner, develop the O-line because you've been investing in it. Now you need to start hitting on those investments and you need to see more out of them. We'll talk more about how they need to do that moving forward. I got an episode on the play action pass coming up with Wes Euler for tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Thanks again for tuning in to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be back Wednesday with the newest episode where we record with Brooke Pryor from ESPN, talking more about what the Steelers need to do, other rumors on who they could be going after in free agency or in trades. All that coming up in the coming days here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias. Same handle everywhere, @CarterCritiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, here on your favorite podcasting apps or on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily episodes. Back tomorrow with Wes Euler on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.